Martinez cocktail history. Thought to be the father of the martini, or at least acknowledged to have had a huge amount of influence on it, the Martinez's origins belong in a cloudy haze of uncertainty. It most likely started life sometime in the 1860s or 70s, but is first known to have been published in O. H. Byron's The Modern Bartender, in 1884. Byron's succinct summary of the Martinez states that it is the same as Manhattan, only you substitute the gin for whiskey. The difficulty in this very simple statement is that he gives two versions of the Manhattan and no suggestion of which the Martinez is to follow. Both a dry and sweet Manhattan were recorded. In the years since, this has added greatly to the confusion. The sweet version was the one that was followed throughout the 1880s, but as an appetite for drier drinks became ubiquitous by the 1920s, the alternative that Byron suggested was used instead. This also coincides with the availability of such ingredients that were necessary in order to make the latter, and the ban on drinking alcohol in America. This led many American natives to European shores, including some of the best bartenders in America, who thus became influenced by a European taste and style, which is distinctively drier. Throughout the 1930s, further recipes continue along the same vein, and we begin to see that proportionately less vermouth is used to the amount of gin served. Incidentally, during this era the martini was also slowly being made drier and drier too. However, it's worth noting that apart from in Bryan's guide, there aren't two separate recipes for the Martinez cocktail in later recipe books, so it does not seem possible that you could order it dry or sweet like you could with the martini and Manhattan. If this verbal understanding did indeed exist between barkeep and customer, it was never written down unequivocally. This casts doubt over whether this choice was meant to have existed in the first place. Even though the dry version was published by different authors more times than the sweet version, today, the dry vermouth-based Martinez is almost never the one that is usually produced when ordered at a bar. This in part has been the case due to Thomas's influential book, which has got a near-cult status. Jerry Thomas's The Bon Vivant's Companion also gave rise to a recipe that is often thought of to be the drink's template and one of the tales for where it was first invented. Possible origin stories for the Martinez. The Occidental Hotel in which Thomas was bartender, was a popular drinking spot and good location for a respite in between the journey from Montgomery Street to Martinez, the route and destination from which tourists took the ferry. Based in California, the story goes that Thomas created this drink for a visitor bound to Martinez, which he subsequently named the cocktail after. However, Thomas had not published the Martinez in his edition of this cocktail guide dated to 1862, only writing about it in his 1887 version, circulated 2 years after his death. The source is not referenced in his book. Additionally, there is little other evidence that he was the creator. Indeed, the people of Martinez claim that the namesake Martinez cocktail was first produced in their town. There is even a plaque proudly hung up that commemorates its creation, possibly done so in an effort to protect and certify their story. If this was to be true, then Julio Richelieu's story could be valid. In about 1870, Richelieu served a customer in his town of Martinez, with a gin and vermouth drink, popped a pickled fruit in and thus created the star of this legacy. Whether this is the real history behind such an iconic drink will always remain a mystery. Moreover, just to spite us, the Martine and Marguerite, which are also mixes of gin, bitters, and vermouth, which were first produced around the same time. This provokes the question of whether or not this bracket of drinks were at one point all the same, but through time and being passed on from one bartender to the next, they came to be the separate drinks that they are today, with their distinguishing yet very similar names. There is a big question over whether the Martinez and Martini started life as the same drink with different names, but then over time their names got muddled and they evolved into the different drinks that they are today, the former being heavily involved with vermouth and sweet tasting, the latter being a dry cocktail whose central base is that of gin. Either way, it is commonly believed by cocktail historians and educated barkeeps that the Martini and Martinez are related, but it seems we will never be certain.